So for everyone who's been sitting around, just waiting for this whole coronavirus thing to end, I decided to do my first podcast and interview. This is Skinny Ebert, and I'm interviewing one of the directors and the writers behind one of my favorite films of 2019, Cuck. This is Rob Lambert. How are you doing, Rob? Nice to meet you.
Skinny, how are you, man? Thanks for
I'm
having me
doing
on.
great, I'm doing great, thank you. It's always nice to have a famous person on board whenever possible.
Well, at this point, I don't know if I'm famous. Probably infamous online a little bit, but not for all the right reasons after this movie came out. But yeah, I'll take it.
Well, all the naysayers, who cares what they think? Your movie is gold, and that's what matters.
All right, I like it. I like it. I like people that tell me good things. Thanks, Skinny.
Hey, you're more than welcome. So I was going to provide the first question to you if you're interested.
Sure.
How did the script come about? Did you research sites like Daily Stormer, InfoWars, Gab, and 8chan? I know someone who visits those sites to troll around and play with the people that spout that rhetoric, almost like Ron Stallworth, the character that was referenced in the Spike film movie Black Klansman.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Right. I'm not naturally someone who's on those boards. So yeah, it was. Well, first, I guess I should explain sort of where the kind of why I dove into a character study like this. And for me, as a filmmaker, I've always been drawn to fringe, outsider characters, the loner characters, and I was running up against different projects that I was involved in where I would write projects or create projects that the wall, if you will, was always, well, you haven't done a feature, so we're going to keep interviewing directors to make this thing that you wrote or created. So I've been thinking a long time about what I wanted to do for my first feature and how to make it. And I didn't have a lot of kind of funds at my fingertips, so I sort of started thinking about what could I do at a micro budget level that would kind of show what I can do and kind of also lean into something that I can spend 2 years working on and not get bored of. So so basically I started kind of circling different kind of loner stories I wanted to do, and around the same time, this is about 2016 2017 when I was circling this idea, I got really hooked on these YouTube videos online of these political brawls, if you will. They were it would be basically, it was the summer of 2016, and you would see these grown men dressed up as superheroes in the run up to the election, and they were all kind of fighting for in the name of this reality TV star that's now our president on the right, and then on the left it would be these super left leaning liberals in black masks and bike locks, and these two groups would basically wage war on the streets of Berkeley, Portland, Huntington Beach. Those are the ones that I sort of started kind of like gleefully watching, and just these guys would dress up as like Captain America and have these kind of weird swords and cardboard shields, and they'd be running into each other, and nobody was doing too much damage. They were all just kind of like bumping into each other, and once in a while one would like hit somebody over the head, and a melee would break out. And so I just started like really at first just kind of watching him, almost like you'd watch like, I don't know, something like World Star like fights or something, where I just was like continually watching these videos. And I started to wonder, like, where are these people coming from? Where are they getting their information? And it was around the same time too that these very charismatic sort of far right leaning YouTube personalities kind of came on the scene. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. So you would see, you know, different people who would try to speak at a college and get, you know, giant protests about them. And so I started kind of like linking all these things together. And sure enough, a lot of them were coming from 4chan and Reddit. And at that time, I don't think so much 8chan. I think that happened like a year or two later. But we started, when Joe and I, the co-writer, started circling this idea, and I was kind of like pitching him this loner story, we started getting on the sites and created some profiles and poked around on, you know, 4chan. And, you know, it wasn't too much undercover work. You don't have to, you know, really go undercover. You just start a profile, and you know, you can just kind of watch what happens. And so we did a lot of online research that way, where we were kind of figuring out like what really makes our guy tick. And during that time, you know, I started kind of submitting early drafts. Once we started having drafts of the script, I was submitting it, and we had I submitted it to a couple to the blacklist, and it was around in 2017, and I had some people from the incel community reach out, and they had gotten a hold of the script. And one guy was saying basically, well, first it was a very aggressive like message, and then when I kind of responded without much like emotion about it, just kind of what are you so mad about? They just basically leaned into it and said, you know, if you're going to do this movie, don't mess it up. You know, you got to talk about the loneliness, or you're just going to be purely making fun of us. So that kind of stuck with me as we were kind of writing. And that was before we really, you know, once we started getting into the plot, and sort of what happens in the film kind of came later. But that's how we initially came up with our kind of our character, or our character study. You know, and for me, Ronnie in the film comes to represent what I call, and what a lot of people call, Red Pill Nation, which is kind of a way to say, it's sort of a term that represents a lot of different things. Nationalism, incel culture, racism, gun culture, conspiracy theories, stolen valor. And we just saw an opportunity to kind of hold a mirror up while also doing like a pretty hardcore character study. So that was the genesis of that.
Because for me, when I was seeing the film, I definitely got a very strong sense of this fellow done his research about the culture that sort of exists within the far right elements. And, you know, when I was seeing everything that was sort of filtering through his mind, I was reminding myself of people like Steve Crowder, Gavin McInnes, especially from the Chartstown main character, who is, in many ways, I thought he was kind of hilarious with that ridiculous mustache of his. And but when you actually meet these people in real life, they kind of believe their own sort of sorry about that. They kind of believe in their own sort of bullshit, that sometimes they forget there's other people in the room hearing what you have to say. And I definitely got that from particular scenes of Ronnie, when he started going in his little diatribe about how Cuck is like a pussy to that girl he was trying to date online on the fake Plenty of Fish dating app.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's,
anyways,
yeah.
Very.
He kind of doesn't even really know the full meaning in the way that, you know, his community is using it either, and that's part of his character and his, I guess if you want to call it, his own research, or lack thereof.
Well, you know, he's a troubled person from what I was getting at. All he wanted to be, you know, was like his father, but his father passed away in wartime. And, you know, that can play on a child's mind. And he's kind of alone. Many people can relate to that, but, you know, to some extent, he takes it a bit too far there in many ways. Which kind of leads me even to the second question I want to provide about Ronnie, the center of it all. Was he inspired by particular characters in cinema, like Norman Bates, Henry the serial killer, Patrick Bateman or Bill Defense Foster from Falling Down, or real life people like Timothy McVeigh, Dylan Roof, or Anders Breivik, who killed all those people in Utøya Island in Norway?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, he's actually those two groups, and then a third group, which is people that I actually know, and people that Joe knows, and people that you probably know. I feel like everyone has gone to high school with at least one, if not more, Ronnies. But yeah, Ronnie exists in, of course, popular culture. I mean, many of the lone wolf shooter guys are really Ronnies. And while we were writing and kind of like finishing up drafts and turning in drafts and trying to get people interested in what we wanted to do and get people on board with the film, there just happened to be this huge outbursts of, I guess you'd call them these spree shootings, lone wolf shootings. And so many of the guys that were coming out at that time were matching exactly what we had kind of mapped out in our script. So it wasn't even something that we were, of course, creating out of, it's not something we created out of the figment of our imagination. It was, something that was just happening. And, while we were, I think it was when we had our first draft, the Charlottesville, James Fields guy, that incident with the car happened where he drove into a crowd of people. And that's when I first read his background, I was just like floored. It was like exactly everything Joe and I had kind of mapped out about our Ronnie. He checked every box. He was an isolated, lonely young guy. He's living with his mom, where there was like a fractured, kind of strange relationship. His father was gone. He didn't know his father. He was obsessed with the military he couldn't get into. And he kind of got lost after high school, which happens to a lot of young men, where they kind of just float. And I think at that time is when he came across what I call the Red Pill Nation stuff online. And he went full bore. I mean, he finally found purpose and thought he was gonna, he thought he was part of a community. And I think he went down to Charlottesville to basically become a hero. And you see these images of him marching around with the tiki torches, I think the night before he drove his car into the crowd, and he looks like he was like really really fired up to be with his boys, and he probably in his mind thought he was going to be a vaulted hero after it went down. And it was just interesting to see after that happened just how quickly all those guys that he basically held up on a pedestal, how quickly they backpedaled and tried to distance themselves from him, and take note. They basically ratcheted this guy up, and he goes out and he does this thing, and then they basically take no responsibility for it. And so yeah, Ronnie's he caught what I call the American virus, and it's, that term probably doesn't fly right now because of the coronavirus, but right now we're actually I'm pitching a documentary idea to dive into the real life Ronnies, and we're calling it the American virus, but the idea is to kind of profile and kind of meet some real people that are going through this. So yeah, that's kind of how Ronnie, the character of Ronnie came about too, more building on Ronnie.
I'm glad of your response there, because I've met a few Ronnies in my life for myself. None of them went as far as funny. There might be some spoiler alerts on this, but he does commit a massacre toward the end, and that's all I'm saying at this point. But yeah, it is a little bit unsettling where you get to know people too well. You might know their darker side of themselves. Well, actually, believe it or not, weirdly enough, one of the people who I work with, I think he's like one of my managers or supervisors. He even looks quite a lot like Zachary Sherman's representation of Ronnie. He's kind of overweight. He kind of has the big blue eyes and the sort of weird hair.
Yeah.
It even makes sort of weird off-the-cuff jokes and he is conservative. So I don't know if that was meant to be some sort of unintentional real life encounter with a Ronnie type, but if that is true, then I'll keep my distance within 50 kilometers. But
Yeah, maybe I met your supervisor and that inspired it, and I just
looking people at first glance, people can get really rude. But yeah, so yeah, even people like you said, they turn their backs on others. They done that as well with Chris Catwell. He was that fellow who everyone said was the crying Nazi.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Yeah.
And then everyone wanted, hey, why did you turn against us? Well, simply because
right. Yeah,
he
that
was
was
bear in mind for everyone watching this. It's uncut. He said Jews will not replace us, and he started blaming communists and spilled milk on people. No, spilled milk on himself when he got like pepper sprayed. So I thought that was but yeah, right-wing celebrities in many ways, like Gavin McInnes and stuff, and to some extent Joe Rogan. I like to see how they think, because sometimes, this may be offensive, but I sometimes view that as what most Americans think, when I shouldn't judge it that way. So, I watch like a Joe Rogan video about what he thinks about snowflakes and SJWs and libtards, and I kind of take that for his, opinion that, this is what most American guys think, and British men are kind of like that too. We're kind of chauvinistic, un-PC lot ourselves.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the irony, is the guys yelling the loudest about this bullshit PC culture and all that stuff. They're also the biggest snowflakes who can't take criticism or are too sensitive. I mean, we've experienced just when the film came out, just how true that is. It's
boy. Yeah, I know. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but yeah, I saw the downvotes on the trailer and stuff. I just thought, wow, that's even worse than the Ghostbusters remake or Captain Marvel. I thought, really?
Well, let me tell you, this is pretty funny. So on my IMDb page, I have different projects and things that no one's ever seen. I have short films or short documentaries that no one's even seen. And since this movie came, I had no rankings or no ratings on any of them. And the minute this movie came out, like every single project that I have on IMDb was ranked like a 1 or a 2. Things that no one is probably ever going to see in their life, but something that I'm sort of attached to is probably unfairly getting Cuck backlash, which has been interesting, which just kind of shows that none of that online rating stuff really matters anyway.
No, I think it's just a sort of cesspool for hate and trolling. That's pretty much all the internet is. I mean, I go on YouTube all the time, my friend, and I look at the comment sections on almost everything these days, right wing, left wing, and there is a pervasive right wing influence that I am seeing on a lot of the comment sections, like immigration videos. Anytime there's a video about white genocide, cultural Marxism, political correctness gone mad, it's just like, okay, I'm staying out of this. And maybe to some extent on left-wing platforms, they'll say, you are a rich white male who hates anyone who is poor or brown or isn't Christian, etc., etc. So, kind of goes both ways there. But, this is your movie. If I talk about other matters and stuff, it kind of gets me a little bit off tangent. So I'll try to reel it back in.
It's all good. I like to hear your thoughts on things. It's fine.
Hey, you're more than welcome there. Hopefully, the humor elements can get more people, watching and listening, saying like. But the next question I was going to say was about the film censorship, because I know the film is quite graphic in its sexual content, and I was a bit worried that the film would get an NC-17. Now I know you released it unrated, I'm assuming for you because it's practical, and also you probably weren't going to play at many venues anyways. But
Mm.
was you ever worried that for censorship reasons that you wanted to stay out of the NC-17, just give it unrated? Because that's what Nymphomaniac and 9 Songs did.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, for us, I guess at this point, you're not required, if you're distributing or even going to theaters, you're actually not required to go through the MPAA, especially for an independent kind of small film. So, for us, it just wasn't worth subjecting it to that really, and having to go through all rounds and rounds of cuts. So really, unless you're a studio film and you're going out to larger audiences and you're required to do it. Now in Europe and UK, Australia, which we're doing a release in April, they require it, and we submitted to them, and we got a +18 certificate. So yeah, I guess if we would have gone the MPAA US route, we probably would have gotten that NC-17. But yeah, there is a weird stain on your movie if you get an NC-17 in the US, which is different if you get a +18 in UK. I don't know, for some reason it's like more of a taboo film if you get an NC-17 in the US. So yeah, there was a couple reasons. It's also, it's expensive, and yeah, unless you really, really want to get that rating, there's no reason to do it.
Totally reasonable. I think you kind of done the right thing there, because if your film got the NC-17, they would have relegated it to the dark section. The section that kids start going to when if they still have Blockbuster to this day, which unfortunately they don't. There would have been a man in a yellow jacket saying, "Where's the movie called Cuck? I need to watch a film about cuckoldry." But yeah, I'm sure maybe some people watch it because they want to see Monique Parent get busy with people, or watch Zach Sherman's character Ronnie masturbating. But I would say it's far removed from any sort of titillation. What was more titillating was watching there was a movie I saw recently called Dogs Don't Wear Pants. That movie, kind of like yours, was very graphic in its sexual content, but I would say Dogs Don't Wear Pants, which is from Finland, was a lot more graphic and aggressive because of the S&M element. Your film doesn't have that. It was mostly fetishes, interracial, and implied masturbation. We don't actually see him touching his cock. Excuse my French. You just sort of know that he's playing with himself in a way that would be unholy to the most Christian audience.
Sure. Yeah.
But how you're saying 18 certificate, because it got for strong sex, discriminatory language and behavior. A lot of films do receive 18s in Britain, but it's a lot less common than it used to be. Pulp Fiction, Midsommar, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Hardcore Henry, but weirdly enough, not John Wick or the Purge films. Those were 18s, those were 15s. But yeah, 18 is a common and popular category for films that are quite advanced and mature. Now you can be said you're in the same camp as, like the Tarantino films I've just mentioned, or for that matter, something as nasty as Human Centipede, which we're not going to go there. We're going to cut. Speaking of sex, how difficult was it to get Monique Parent on board and any clearance to use pornographic and explicit images during the film? Was it easier to write the sexual elements or the political, racial elements? As a man, I would be too frightened to have a female actress like that bear it all out and get intimate. Now I know it's all in context, but ooh.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the thing about the sex in the film is that, and the reason it was used and shot the way that it was is, somebody like Ronnie, one of his main problems is sex or lack thereof, or a misunderstanding of how to approach women. And so we wanted to lean into that aspect of Ronnie discovering that couple discovering his neighbors, and we wanted to dip the audience and Ronnie into it at the same time with the same amount of abruptness and you know, kind of faux real time, if you were. You know, for Ronnie, he's learned much of his, you know, relationships with women have mostly come through stuff he's seen online, and he's, you know, like a lot of young men his age, is, you know, what he's learned about sex has all come from, you know, all the porn tube site, the YouPorn, X videos. So he's got a skewed, you know, interaction with real women, and I feel like we wanted to highlight that. And you know, I do feel bad for introverted young guys today who have, you know, heavy social anxiety issues because, you know, really there is no outlet for them in a lot of ways except through, you know, watching porn online. And so, you know, you add these things together, and it combines to create somebody like Elliot Rodger, who was the UC Santa Barbara incel shooter. And so we really wanted to lean into that. For us, that was important to show those scenes as they were. You know, it would have been a disservice if we would have shot the, you know, quick cuts of the sex, or made it, you know, quote unquote sexy or glamorous, or shot it with, you know, soft lenses, because that's not what we wanted to portray. We wanted to really drop Ronnie into this world, and drop the viewer into it as well. So for those scenes, you know, you need the perfect actress. You need someone who can act, but you need someone who's comfortable in their skin in that way that they're going to be able to handle those scenes and still act and make it believable. And basically Monique, she pulled it off. She's an absolute pro. You know, her performance is really, I think, kind of the main force for balancing Zach's performance. You know, her professionalism the day that we shot those scenes, and her incredible range when she did the emotional scenes. There wouldn't have been a better actress to play that part. And I was really lucky to have found Monique, and she and I had a lot of discussions going into it, and I mapped out every single thing we were going to do. And, you know, Monique has been in different films that have required sex scenes, like a lot of actresses have, and she was aware of, you know, we used all the precautions. We had an on-set, you know, I guess you'd call it sex scene guide. I'm forgetting the monitor, I guess.
Intimacy coordinator.
Exactly. There you go. We had a monitor, intimacy coordinator. We used the, you know, all the you know, the men wear the socks, and Monique was well covered. So everything was as it would be on an R-rated film, which is kind of what we were shooting. So there's no full frontal nudity from men or women in the film. And the way we shot it, and the way I mapped it out with the cinematographer Nick Matthews, who's a genius as well, we were able to shoot it in a way that I feel like a lot of people's reactions to the sex scenes are really, if they really broke down what they're actually seeing, I think they'd be surprised about how little they're actually seeing. You know, there is really nothing below the waist that ever comes to sight. And you know, I think we did, you know, with Monique and Zach and Tim Murphy and even Sally and the guys who played the men who were supposed to be in the porn films. They all brought such a heavy professionalism that they made, you know, an uncomfortable kind of anxiety-ridden day or two kind of fly by. And you know, I can't say that there were any issues other than other than I guess people's reactions to it later, which I guess I shouldn't have been that surprised. But yes, you're right. There's there is a thought that that these kind of scenes would be too graphic, and but I stick to that we absolutely needed them to be this way. Otherwise, we're glamorizing it, and that's not what we intended to do.
Because
So,
from my perspective, I saw it as a trickle-down effect of his sexual dysfunction and illusions getting to the best of him. And it's not pornography. It is not, in my opinion, Nymphomaniac 9 songs or In the Realm of the Senses, which are full-on and even show unsimulated penetration and jacket masturbation. Don't worry, this is uncut. Children will not be watching this. I can give you that there. So, but yes, I felt in many ways it was quite raw, and it was almost like a throwback to sort of sex dramas like Shame, or Don John, Midnight Cowboy, or I know you said Bad Lieutenant a bit earlier on, but that movie had some rape and stuff. That's a bit of a different type of beast. That was horrible.
Sure.
That was horrible. But yes, it's kind of in that same vein as sort of, it's not pornographic. It's removed of any sort of titillation vibe about it, even though some people could construe it as such. You know, that movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah.
Most kids or teens with hormones, they won't watch it for the little cartoon gags. They watched it because Jessica Rabbit had the breasts and stuff. They were kind of playing themselves.
Right.
So telling their parents, "Mom, I'm just watching a cartoon," but they're secretly, jacking the bird one side, choking a chicken. But I'll stop. That's just me getting a bit out of hand there.
No. I mean, look, I think we're in a time where everything is approached with a lot of sensitivity, and I think in some ways it's good that there's some people looking out, but I do think there's a soft spot in especially commercial films now for films made for adults. The idea that you used to be able to go and see some of the films you mentioned, or even like Buffalo 66 or Bad Lieutenant,
or like Brown Bunny or
sure,
like
yeah. I mean, there's such a I don't know. You kind of hit it on the head. There's such a I guess just an overall sensitivity to it, and I certainly want the pendulum to swing back and sort of equalize a little bit, and because some people want to see movies made for adults, and don't confuse that with adult movies, but movies made for adults who want to see narrative films that aren't afraid to have a bit of sex in it, body heat.
No, you completely said it there. Abel Ferrara, who's done Bad Lieutenant, said this very same thing. If it's going to be for adults, don't sanitize it. And I'm seeing, every once in a while you get a film like Gone Girl or or 50 Shades. Well, actually, that might not be a good example, but you kind of get the idea of a film that isn't too shy a way to show you a little tit, maybe, brief shot of a man's penis or something like that, or even for that matter, violence, drugs, language. Trainspotting, they've done a sequel for it recently. I thought that was a great movie. But in my home country, it was 18. You had to be 18 to go see it. But that kind of excites me because, as a child, there were certain things I wanted to see, but I couldn't. Like Pulp Fiction, for instance, which is not for children completely. Because I thought Uma Thurman was very attractive, but not knowing that the film would have graphic scenes of heroin use and gay rape sequence and shootouts and a lot of F words. That's
sure.
A parent would say, hell no. I even got in trouble for watching South Park bigger, longer, and uncut as a child. Like, they thought, oh, it's not a bad movie. It's got a cartoon. Oh, it ain't. But sure. Well, I kind of got off topic there.
Well, not to harp too much on, the addiction to what I think is an addiction to online porn. I think that the rise of, and this isn't a brand new take or anything, but the rise of pornography online is also the decline of the movies made for adults. You know, everything 2000 and after, for the most part, you know, there's some films sprinkled in there, but a lot of them have been desensitized since, you know, pornography became so readily available. It's almost like people thought, well, what do we need to put sex in a narrative R-rated film for when you can get as much of it as you want online. And yeah, I mean, I think I hope that it sort of self-corrects a little bit, because I think that's like I said, I think that's sort of lacking in films today. Everything.
No, you're right there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about sort of titillation and glory. More so, I would say violence is the thing that's triggering everyone. You
Mhm.
know, show as much blood and gore as you can. And in Cuck, I thought it was quite restrained. You know, there's some bloody detail toward the end. No spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. But you know, compared to something like John Wick or Hardcore Henry, that the Purge films, they're full of blood and death, and they're even in my home country 15s. Your film's an 18, but I think that's because it's 18 because it's realistic.
Right.
It's, you know, the other films are 15s because they're a bit more over the top and more over the, you know, splat about it.
Right.
So I'm a bit of a lost for words right now, but
well,
you know, I said. What?
They resemble video games, the movies you're referring to. They, you know, that first shooter thing is almost such a, you know, a well-known thing, that over-the-top John Wick thing, which is pretty popular. That's straight out of video games. You know, the sloppy shooter who is having a hard time loading his clip is not in a lot of films, and it does, you know, I think it does strike people as more real. And maybe that's what's scary about it, and sort of the point as well.
Because films that depict, you know, realistic scenarios, which will lead to the next question, you know, are actually more disturbing than the films that are just over the top about, like John Wick or Hardcore Henry. Like 12 Years a Slave. That was a really frightening film for me because, you know, it happened. It has a racial inflection to the violence, and that's the sort of thing that might likely make people lose sleep. I hope so.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a very politicized type of situation, kind of like your film. If you don't agree with it, you're going to pass off as nothing. If you agree with it, you're going to be mortified. Which leads to the next question about that film that often gets compared to your film. You know, the one with Joaquin Phoenix. I'm sure that kind of upsets you as to why. Please stop comparing it to that film.
Yeah, you're referring to Clay Pigeons, right? I'm kidding.
If only.
You know, look, doesn't upset. Here's the thing. The whole thing about, you know, the Joker. For me, it's all about the lead performances of what both the actors are able to do, and I might be the biggest Joaquin Phoenix fan that roams the green earth, you know, and I hope to one day work with him. However, I put Zachary Ray Sherman's performance right there with his from Cuck. In, you know, what Zach did was he dove into the skin of a real person who's, you know, a topical, noteworthy real person of today. And Joaquin did an amazing job and totally went for it. But I put Zach right there with him. I mean, in 50 years, when people are watching these movies, I think they're going to be just as blown away by Zachary Ray Sherman and Cuck. Now, the interesting part about the whole Cuck Joker thing, and you know, I'm sure that it affected us much more than it affected the Joker, which I think grossed $1 billion. Is the amount of the online backlash that came from Joker fanatics. You know, as our film was coming out, it's almost like they took up a cause against Cuck, because there was some reviews that had come out that said, you know, if you're going to go to the movies this weekend and you want to see a movie about you know, kind of a loner film, and you want to see something real, go see Cuck. Now, I think those Joker fans took that as a slight, though I'm not sure why. It's a Joker it comes from a fictional comic book story, so it was just interesting seeing the avalanche of Joker fans, angry alt-right dudes, incel guys, who kind of took it upon themselves to kind of ratio us online. So anything from any trailer we had on YouTube, any rating system you could do on the film, there was mobs and mobs of people. This is even before the film was released, that were sabotaging like all of our rankings. So at one point, I think on IMDb, before anyone even saw the movie, we had like a 1.8 ranking with like a couple thousand votes that were all ones, and no one had even seen the movie yet. And this is just from the trailer. And so I kind of knew that we were in for a bit of a storm once the trailer hit. And then that, coupled with the release of the movie the same day as the Joker, I think that put a target on us as well. There was a lot of noise about our movie in some ways that was good for us and our visibility. But for in some ways a little film like ours, which was made for sub 500K, to be in the crosshairs of a giant after marketing couple $100 million movie, it was quite a scene. I think it was if there ever was a David versus Goliath, that was it. And so it was interesting to see all that play out, and I have mixed feelings about it, but nothing against Joker, though I will clear this one thing up that I've seen online, that we were somehow trying to ride Joker's coattails. We shot the movie in February 2018, and we had a picture lock cut that went out to festivals that summer in June or July of 2018. And that was 2 or 3 months before Joker even shot a frame of their film. So to all those people saying that we were trying to somehow cash in on the Joker, we had no idea the Joker was even happening. So I'm just going to leave that out there for people.
I'm glad you did that there, because I think your film was unfairly judged in many corners there. If people actually did see it, they would see something that was honest to God and powerful, for which it was. Now, with that being said, however, I have seen the film that I'm not allowed to talk about. I thought it was very good. I did unfortunately put it in a tie between you and your film, mainly for practical reasons. One, it didn't come out in the UK. Your film didn't come out in Britain at the time, so I saw it when I was in America with family. And also, many people try to compare it as two films about angry loners who have a bit of a rage against society. So for practical reasons, I had to kind of lump them as one and sort of say on my video, this is a film that's even more controversial than that. And to my credit, and I'm glad, we're sort of friends on part of this, is that I defended your corner from people who are trying to say that this is propaganda, from which it isn't. It is a movie that has to be seen to be heard. And I think, with the Joker, one of my greatest issues with it is that it's tied to IP, intellectual property. If it wasn't so tied to IP, if it was the original story, like yours, or American History X, or Fallen Down, or Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, I probably have just a little bit more respect for it.
Sure.
And also, just between you and me, your film, if it wasn't for Toy Story 4, which is a film I saw it, made it for nostalgia purposes, your film would have been top ranking. Trust me.
Well, Toy Story 4, it's I'll take that, because Toy Story 4 actually, I know one of the writers on Toy Story 4, so
Well, I know that's a completely different film. It's for families. It's animated. It's, for me, nostalgia porn. So if it didn't come out last year, Cuck would have been the #1 film. 'Cause I
Oh,
talk about to more people a lot more than other films I saw last year, like Queen and Slim, Good Boys, Jojo Rabbit, which is kind of like your movie, quite topical, Bombshell, and a few others. I'm not going to name the whole list because that probably might annoy you.
No. I listen. I'm a movie fan before anything, so nothing annoys me about talking about other movies, and it's cool to hear you kind of run down the ones that you liked this year. I agree. I think those films were all pretty great.
What was your favorite film last year outside of, your own?
Yeah.
I could presume it was probably like Uncut Gems or Jojo Rabbit.
Actually, Uncut Gems I liked a lot. I haven't seen Jojo yet. That's on my list. I really liked The Nightingale. I thought
Oh man, you like that one too? I did as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about raw and uncompromising. I mean, there was a fair amount of blowback on that film and the director as well, but I mean, that film went for it, and it was kind of the opposite of watered down content. Nightingale, kind of really leaned into, a lot of times you see historical films, Civil War movies or whatever, and you sort of feel like the characters and the actors are actually from, the present day. And Nightingale, I felt like they did a really cool job of the acting and sort of and everything that went into it more matched, and obviously the scene work and what was happening in the scenes, it matched more of what would have been happening in 1800s outback Tasmania than a lot of films you'll see, which feel too glossy to be actual historical films. So I thought Jennifer Kent, I mean, that was my gem for the year, was Nightingale. If anybody hasn't seen that yet and you want to see something that's really goes for it, I'd see Nightingale.
Nightingale is a very powerful film indeed. I personally was cheering for both the Indigenous man and Aisling Franciosi's character, Claire. I thought that movie was absolutely terrifying, but it very much plays into what's going on between the rampant rate of sexual violence and misogyny that's going on in society. And as a male viewer watching it, I'm not from Australia, I'm from Great Britain. I could even relate to that sort of anger involved, especially from the Indigenous character, because he saw his land being taken over by colonizers, the British government. He saw many of his women in his community raped and assaulted by white officers. And it was just, I can't watch that movie again. Kind of like 12 Years a Slave. It's unlimited doses.
No, for
Otherwise,
sure.
I might even turn to Ronnie if I watch that movie again. Don't let me turn into Ronnie.
Yeah, don't turn into Ronnie, Skinny.
No. But I will say, for next question as well, in Britain, we don't have the gun culture, black versus white racism that you have in America, or Brazil, South Africa, but we do have radicals that feel empowered by Brexit. With an upcoming UK release that's going on, what do you hope is the message that you will send to those abroad who might not understand some of the Americanized subtleties or political nuances of your story? Because in Britain, we did have assassination, it's not Charlottesville level, but we did have an MP being gunned down by someone named Thomas Meyer, and the lady was Jo Cox. She was of the Labour Party, and he was doing it in the name of British nationalism and Brexit.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think there are a lot of there's a lot of crossover similarities, US and UK. We're opening theatrically in the UK April 17th, hopefully with of course with the coronavirus stuff going on right now, everything's up in the air, but that's what we're slated to do. And as well as Australia, we're going to VOD in the UK and Australia the 20th. But the reason why I've been anticipating the UK and Australia releases, because I do think there's a lot of crossover and similarities in some of the, especially some of the beliefs and some of the people that you see in our film and in the US. I think the universal message would be pretty simply, not letting lonely people fall down the rabbit hole. For us, and contrary to popular belief or persistent trolling, this isn't a political film or meant to be a political tool of propaganda. This isn't a message movie. And so I would hope that UK viewers see that as well. It's meant to be presentational. But diving into this character and his life is going to touch politics, whether it be Brexit or on our side, kind of more the alt-right stuff that Ronnie falls into. But for me, I've always said, I would say more politically moderate, and so for me, having any real allegiance to a team, like the way I view what's happening now is there's like hardcore right, hardcore left, and yeah, they have different names in the UK and Australia, but there's a similar sort of battle going on. And so with Cuck, I feel like universally, and I know that a lot of people blow back about this, but I think this is a presentational film, and one that we tried hard not to lead people around by the nose and tell you how to feel about Ronnie or what was happening. We're just simply pulling back the curtain on a very specific person. But I will say, as many people that were upset on the right, we had just as many, probably a little more subtly upset people on the far left for 180-degree reasons of why they were mad about the movie. More so mad about giving people like Ronnie a platform is kind of some of the blowback we got. Some of the sensitivity to young people today, hearing the things Ronnie is saying was hard for some people. So I think there was a combination of seeing the sex that's in the movie that was necessary to be in there to show what Ronnie's all about, to hear some of the political stuff Ronnie's saying and some of his beliefs about different cultures, basically all cultures except his own, and a lot of the basically gun culture stuff that you see in the US. So a lot of those combinations, you had people upset for exact opposite reasons on both sides of the political spectrum, and that's sort of what made it both a water cooler topic, our film, but also such a magnet for noise and hate. So it was interesting, and I think it's going to do a similar thing in the UK, and I welcome it because we knew this going in, that this film was, it's the same way that the film is rated on. You go on IMDb and you see people giving ratings. You get, tens and ones, and you get, that's exactly what happened when we had the script out on the blacklist. We had people rating it 10 and 1. And so back even when we had the script, and it was so polarizing, and then when it was just in script form, I thought, man, this is so polarizing. I have to do it. I have to figure out a way to get this made. And I think we're going to see a very similar reaction in the UK.
Well, I hope the reaction is positive, because Mark Kermode is one of my favorite film critics, aside from Roger Ebert. He probably will say a few good things about it, but he, like you said about the far left thing, he does tend to be a bit known for his strong views on feminism and anti-male viewpoints, so he might take an objection to the sex scenes, but I hope not, because this is a great movie. I can't be the only one who has to sort of push it into greatness there, but yes, I'm sure, because in Britain, the closest thing we would have to a movie like Cuck is This Is England, and Australia, we've got, they got Romper Stomper.
Yep.
Those are great movies.
Great films, yeah.
But those are films like yours that prove to be quite polarizing on an audience level, but critics-wise, they seem to sort of thrive on it because they've read into it as... Because film critics tend to lean leftward more so than rightward, except for like Michael Medved and a few other names. Armand White. Don't ever listen to Armand White. He probably would hate your movie.
Oh, man.
But yes.
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple people, I think, big reviewers. I'm not gonna say who they write for, but you could tell reading the review that what they saw in Ronnie maybe was too much for them to really analyze in what they didn't like about it, and maybe the reflection was a little strong. And so I think you're going to have reviewers and regular people, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the movie. Um, and yeah, I think, look, 20 years ago, this would have, I think, been received totally differently, or even 10 years ago. But I think we've really hit a place where basically all ideas are challenged by at least half the people. So, for us,
No, right. Because
go ahead.
Because I saw this quite evidently, not only with your film as well, but with Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman, Get Out,
right.
and just recently The Hunt was a centerpiece for a lot of backlash as well. That if they just saw the film, they could assess it for what it was, but then they just try to put their nose upon it, and then they said, "This is propaganda. I don't like it." Wah wah.
Before even seeing it, yeah.
It's not cool, but it seems like for me, your film got a lot more backlash than even Captain Marvel or Get Out.
Yeah,
and that but that's because they have bigger budgets. They're films from Universal or Disney, so
sure
they can at least get away with it. Rocket Man got a little bit of backlash, but that was more of a censorship issue in Russia because of the homosexual content.
Right.
But, that's in case you probably noticed from some of the responses I've gave you, I'm a bit of a film censorship nerd. I know a few too many things about certain stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, look, I don't understand why people get so up in arms about what's in films. I mean, it seems like everyone, for their own personal or political reasons, everybody wants to censor movies that come out. And for whatever reason, with our film, it struck a nerve with a lot of different people. And for me, hearing you kind of go down the list, more about the censorship on a lot of films than I do. But it's amazing how this is such a thing now. Whereas I don't think there was
cancel culture.
Yeah, I don't think there was all these discussions 10 years ago. And it just, for us, the way I look at it, we made a movie about essentially a guy who is online every day, and he's online for 8 to 10 hours a day, and he's in the chat rooms and a lot of the places that a lot of our critics, our loudest critics, kind of hang out. And so there's a mob mentality about ratioing a film, which is to kind of drive the ratings and everything down so that it kind of gets suppressed. And bigger films like the ones you mentioned at Universal and some of those, they have the proper protection. They have protection against piracy, against mob ratings, against troll reviews, all that stuff that really a little film like ours with a smaller distribution company, we just can't protect against that. And so it's good to hear you kind of voice your opinion about the censorship thing, because I think it goes beyond even censorship. It's almost like, well, it's not even that it's offensive. It's I just don't like what I think it's saying about something that I have a strong opinion about. And that's bullshit to me, that you would kind of round up a group of people and try to somehow like drive a film down because you for some reason don't agree with it or even the premise of it, so without even really understanding the movie. So
yeah, I mean, to each his own, I suppose. I mean, I'm kind of like that as well. When I know this is a bad thing to say, but over recent weeks I have been nitpicking films that I believe seem to, or political scenarios for that matter, that seem to be favoring Joe Biden. I tend to be I tend to lean a little bit more left, and I love Bernie Sanders. But all this love for Joe Biden that's been going on in the primaries and the Democratic establishment and the attacks in Britain over Jeremy Corbyn is a little bit funny. And speaking about that, I'm going to be doing a documentary, hopefully, once all this Corona stuff dies down, and I'm going to publish it on my YouTube channel and maybe submit it to some festivals about why the 2020 election was already in shambles from the start. But, you know, self-advertising is probably something I shouldn't be doing on such a podcast.
No.
So I'll go to the next question in mind about, despite Ronnie's racism and right-wing viewpoints, I do feel sorry for him to some extent, because if he had a father to help him out on his way, maybe even a better education or money, he may not have turned into the person he becomes toward the middle and end of the film. Is it wrong to feel sympathy for Ronnie, or should we punish ourselves?
Yeah, well, great question. I 100% we're not trying to drive sympathy for Ronnie. Maybe empathy, Ronnie's humanness, maybe empathy for that. But, you know, whether you have empathy for Ronnie or not, it doesn't absolve him of the terrible things that we've seen him say and do in the film. I mean, what we want to do is pull back the curtain on people like Ronnie. I mean, but the truth about Ronnie is that he's a human being. He's not a monster. He's not a train killer. He's not Jason Bourne or James Bond or Ted Bundy. He's not some badass. Not that Ted Bundy's a badass, but James Bond or somebody like that. But he's not a psychopath or serial killer like Bundy either. All that is to say, he's just a kind of a regular sort of rudderless guy, you know. And that's really what makes it, I think, so frightening, is that he's not a monster. He's not somebody that, you know, sticks out as somebody who's particularly dangerous until he is. He's an empty vessel guy who basically has been molded for someone else's agenda, and that's what we really wanted to explore. So I think if we would have made a more kind of one-dimensional bad guy that the audience hates, but, you know, somebody more like maybe one of the Columbine kids who had real purpose and a real plan, to me, you do that, and then there's really nothing left to uncover. So with Ronnie, making him multidimensional, it gave us, you know, a better understanding of what can actually bring about any change, if there can be. And so yeah, I think that would be my answer to kind of empathizing with Ronnie. He's just kind of a regular dude, really, at the end of it, and that's what at the end of the movie.
No, he is I've seen people who are like, so you kind of have to be careful of who you associate with, and I kind of learned that the hard way there. I know from an article that you wrote about, you used to know one of the guys who started attacking at like a university when I was in Montana.
Yeah,
so he was like an East Asian man. I don't remember his name, but I think yes.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, that was part of the, you know, some of the genesis behind the film, as well as my I guess my growing up or getting to know Wayne Lowe, who rode our school bus. So I moved actually from we moved from Ireland to Montana when I was in elementary school, and when we got to Billings, one of the people that would ride our school bus was this older kid named Wayne Lowe. I think he was from Taiwan originally, and then had moved to Billings when he was just a little boy, but a very American kid. You know, you wouldn't at that point know he wasn't, just kind of born in the U.S. And basically we saw him, my brother and I every day would ride, and he was somebody who was very much isolated and kind of alone and maybe picked on a little bit. And, you could see there was probably some anger there. But he went to a boarding school in Massachusetts to get out of Montana. I think being one of probably the few Asian kids in Montana at the time. This would have been in the early 90s. Probably was probably hard for him. So he transferred to a boarding school where I think he did 2 or 3 years of high school, and then his senior year, he got kind of caught up in some extreme beliefs, I think, at the school, and he ordered an assault rifle, and then one night went out and started picking off students and a teacher. I think he got a few people, and it's interesting. I have such clear memory of Wayne Lowe when I was just a young boy. And what was interesting about when I started talking about this, when the movie came out, I started getting these messages from Wayne Lowe on Facebook. And at first I was like, well, wait a minute, is this just somebody made, is this some troll, some alt-right troll trying to mess with me? And sure enough, it was Wayne Lowe from prison, who does sort of a proxy. He is somebody who does proxy messages with him, and he got in touch with me through Facebook, and we started a kind of a phone conversation for, a phone call relationship for, a good month or so as the film came out. And he, it's interesting. He's a bit older than me. He's he's now so far removed from when he was a teenager and having committed those shootings, that you talk to him now, you just think he's just a regular guy, one of the nicest guys you could ever talk to. I think young men from 16 to 25 or 28, there's something just that can go really amiss, and I think there is I think it's a gender thing where men can go off the rails between those ages, and I think it has a lot to do with hormones. And I'm not a doctor, scientist, or a psychologist, but it seems to be that's where a lot of these these really horrific events come from, is men between those ages and teenagers. So it was interesting talking to him, because you couldn't talk to a calmer, more pleasant person today. And he was open about his involvement in the shootings, and he actually is friends with one of the fathers of one of the victims. So he's come a long way, and when I talk to him now, he likes to talk about kind of some of the same people that we know. And I think he's been in prison now for more than 20 years. But yeah, at that time, the Wayne Lowe case was a pretty big case, and his family was in Billings, and I know that was hard for everybody. And this was years before the Columbine thing. This is probably 5, 6, 7 years before Columbine. So yeah, there was a lot in the news then about the Wayne Lowe shooting.
Hanau, Germany massacre. Tobias Ratjen. I'll probably mention to you on the side before we've done this interview, his story sounds very similar to Ronnie's, to the point that I almost thought, oh shit, this is like almost close to home.
Right.
It's almost like people are going to start pointing that, oh, if you're a lonely man between these ages and you live with your mother and you don't really have money or job, or your education's a bit on the wonky side, you could very well become a terrorist. I don't know if that was sort of unexpected circumstance that triggered you, or you were just like shocked.
Yeah, look, the thing about Ronnie and the writing of the script is Joe and I didn't, Ronnie's not a figment of our imagination. There's a reason why Ronnie fits all these different guys, and the guys you mentioned, their backgrounds, and James. It's because this is absolutely a real person, and the profile fits the person. So it doesn't surprise me that, and there's going to be more Ronnies that come. I mean, this isn't the end of the Ronnie Brigade.
No, there's still more.
There's still more.
And that's the terrifying part.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had when the movie came out, everybody on the far right wanted to say how far-fetched the film was and how the character's not believable, and it was this real concerted effort to kind of like minimize the reality of Irani. But I would say that, well, they have their own reasons. I would say they're either obtuse to kind of what's really out there, or they're just being willfully ignorant, and they share the same beliefs as Ronnie, or at least some similar beliefs, or someone like Tobias. So I don't think that we have created Ronnies. I think we just mimicked what's going on in society and held a mirror up to it. And we're going to start to see, they're not done coming. I mean, Joe and I spent a lot of time sort of profiling and figuring out the makeup of Ronnie, and this isn't something that we made up or created really on our own. Ronnie's, yes, a fictional character, but what makes up Ronnie and his characteristics and attributes are real people out there today. So yeah, I would just say that it's just another example of Ronnie being a real person and a real threat today, and rather than feeling like we might have created Ronnie. Ronnie's been there long before we came on the scene and wrote this script.
No, I understand there from where you were getting at.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of Ronnie in all of us, but some people have it a bit worse than others. I could say from that perspective, the unintentional circumstances, I can say, oh, this is the movie to blame. I know Conversation, that was a film by Coppola, who done The Godfather.
Oh, yeah.
That came out a little bit before Watergate. And then Watergate happened, where everyone was sort of tapping into someone else's audio and trying to fill information.
Right.
And everyone was saying, Coppola predicted the future. Oh my God, he predicted the future. Matrix, people started pointing fingers at that because of the Columbine massacre. In fact, Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, they were dressed in black with jackets on. Or no, it's like wrong example. Basketball Diaries with DiCaprio has a scene where he has like a long black jacket. He starts killing people inside his class, and that.
Right.
Seeing that from a different perspective, or that scene from Kingsman movie where he just kills a bunch of people inside a church.
Right.
And then something in Texas happened a little bit later, coincided. That can have some unintentional consequences, to the point that I'll probably will have to go into a question that's a bit more lighthearted for you. Like, Ronnie, I don't know if this is unintentional or not, but is he a reference to that Seth Rogen character from Observer Report? Because they're both kind of a bit off the rails. They might have mental issues, but they're, chubby, lovable characters, if you agree with them.
I've never seen Observe and Report, though this isn't the first time it's been referenced since our movie came out, so it's definitely on my list to check it out. But no, in our universe, Ronnie's actually named after Ronald Reagan. He's from and this is kind of diving into the backstory, but he's from a military family. He's got two conservative parents. He's born at the end of the 80s. So yeah, his name is Ronald. So that's kind of where we went with it.
Okay, I didn't even notice it was that way. Yeah. I know Ronald Reagan is a very popular person amongst a lot of them. Yeah, I do tend to meet quite a few people who do hold him to a high regard. Yeah. Even though for a lot of the working class Republican or conservative types, they did lose a lot of money because they shipped jobs overseas, and the trickle-down economics definitely affected a lot of people's pockets that they thought they couldn't afford but very much stuff. So, yeah, I do find people who idealize a politician a bit too much, and the same goes with, to some extent, some people who idealize Obama, despite the fact that he got us into some wars and the Benghazi thing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't hold a politician to such a high stature. I know I sometimes do it with Bernie Sanders, but it's because he's not like a president or prime minister yet. If he was, and I got to see his work more, then I could be a little bit more critical.
Right.
So I just wanted to point that out that way. Yeah. This is also another lighthearted question. We're almost getting to the end of things.
So
One
good.
critic said your film had elements of social satire. Was it ever meant to have elements of dark comedy, or was it supposed to be a straightforward psychological thriller? Because there were some scenes that I found kind of amusing for the wrong reasons, like watching Ronnie naked, and he meets the mustache man played by Timothy Murphy, and he says, "Don't you take clothes off, Ronnie? You fucked my wife. You better pay for that." And then watching Ronnie spit tobacco and Ronnie's mother trying to flirt with the probation officer, I was like,
Right. Yeah. No, look, we definitely embrace the dark humor, or what I like to call factual satire. I mean, but no, Cuck is not a straightforward kind of pratfall comedy. This isn't Anchorman 2 or anything like that. But there's obviously a morbid irony to Ronnie's life, similar to Falling Down, a guy at the end of his rope with this kind of macho complex. And there's some hilarious scenes in Falling Down that are played totally straight, and the humor is from like I said, the factual satire of the moment. So for us, we never intended to sort of make fun of people. It was more to just show exactly what it was and play it straight, and satirical elements would come from that. So the scene work and the way the scenes were written, they have comedic elements, but we instructed the actors and to play everything straight, because we wanted it to be real. And it's sort of it's a fine line of taking a hard look at tough subjects, which is what was our main objective, and really pulling back the curtain on this thing, but also finding moments of levity through human beings being human beings and being sloppy, and not having all the answers, and seeing with a fly on the wall character study, you're going to see a guy in his room doing stuff that normally you don't see people doing. So it's not to make fun, it's just simply we wanted to live with Ronnie and see everything that there is to see. And a lot of it came out funny, because some of it is funny, just the way that someone can get hooked into a lot of these conspiracy theories. Some of that stuff is so hilarious, that but it's really happening and really true. And we didn't, Zach and I talked about it. It was something that we didn't, we absolutely didn't want to do any winking to the camera. And Zach, being the actor that he is, he played it, and I think for him it was the only way it was going to work is if there was no winking to the camera. And the reason his performance is so strong is there is no winking, I think, or trying to laugh with the audience. It's absolutely along the way, man, in the edit, like there were things that we wrote that we were really hoping had that punch to it, that came out the way we wanted it to, that we would be cackling in the edit room. Now I'll watch the movie now and I don't even know what I'm watching. I've seen it so many times sitting through the edits and all that, but I was struck by the amount of people who kind of thought, oh, these guys have no sense of humor about it. They have no idea why it's funny. We actually do, but probably for different reasons than they do, which, is kind of a different conversation. It probably depends on what side of the sort of the political spectrum you're on, the humor you see in it. But for us, yeah, I mean, it's a psychological thriller, but there's also, yeah, absolutely satire in his life and in the scenes.
well, I'm very glad you pointed out there, because some of the moments were quite unintentional, but yeah, overall the film has a very dark, serious tone, which I think is to the film's credit, because it makes it, you think it's provocative and thought-provoking. That's what it should be there. But yes, even I was a bit guilty of sort of snickering at a few things that I probably shouldn't have.
No, look,
if I was writing the script, probably would have made it a bit too much of a like dark Tarantino-esque. The
Yeah.
last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This will be the last question, so I'll let you go and have a wee in the loo when this is all said and done. Will there ever be a spiritual successor or spin-off to Cuck? I would love to see a story similar to your film, but about someone who may have left-leaning views, or is a female, maybe from Britain, or maybe like a Jewish Zionist, like, you know, he hates Palestine, or is a black nationalist like Malcolm X. What's your take on that?
You know, my my reps would probably drop me if I said I was making Cuck 2. But I do think we're gonna have some cameos coming in the future films that have elements of Cuck characters that pop in now and again. You know, I think an amazing series would be if you took the world of Cuck and you built out the world a bit more. You fleshed out characters from the Antifa side. Like if you were going to do a sequel, you'd absolutely want to take on the mask wearing bike lock swinging guys from Antifa. The only problem is they're not nearly as dangerous. You know, and that's one thing that would probably kill the sequel, is that the real action oriented side is really the alt-right side. But yeah, I think you could, if you built out, like if you had a series where you had Antifa characters, you got to know somebody like Chance Dalmain even a little bit more.
He was one of my favorite things in the film because it kind of reminded me of a weird mix of Steve Crowder and Gavin McInnes, who always raps around stuff from Canada on Rebel Media. I mostly watch these alt-right videos mainly for, you know, what are most people thinking, and mainly for comedy. Alex Jones is a good example of this.
Yeah, well, look, you know, in the research for the movie, we watched, you know, probably like 5 to 10 of these guys, and that is part of their thing, is they are kind of naturally funny, charismatic sort of people naturally. So there is an obvious pull there, and you know, if you could dive into a Chance Dalmain and see, you know, if you base the whole film around this guy's sort of growing YouTube empire, a la, you know, Alex Jones before his fall. I think that could be, you know, quite an interesting behind the curtain look. I don't think that today's commercial industry really has the backbone to do anything like that anymore.
No, they're trying to play it too safe, and with you know, COVID-19 in the news, they might say we're only going to finance more sequels to Mission Impossible and Frozen. There's no room for independent cinema anymore.
It's sad because you know, rather than, you know, rehashing 21 Jump Street and a lot of these is really the norm when there are so many fresh, cool stories that could be told today, and everyone's just so afraid of controversy now. You know, Twitter wags the dog with festivals, with awards, with you know, reviews, and so nobody wants to really go out on a limb and do anything with any backbone. So I just don't think you'll see anything like that. It's something I would want to watch. But, you know, there's a reason why you go on your streaming sites and you click around for 45 minutes before you watch, you know, some sort of mediocre sort of reality show, because you don't see anything that you want to watch. There could be so many great films that really detail a lot of the things we've been talking about today, but you won't see big studios or big production companies touch that stuff. Not anymore.
If you do a sequel or spiritual successor to Cuck, I'll definitely be the first one to review it and tell people it's not propaganda. It is great. Trust me. Hear it from my friend, Mr. Rob Lambert. And I thank you so much for doing this interview in my first podcast. I hope we, you know, talk further on about whatever it may be, or another project.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to keep you waiting because you probably need to eat or feed your family or have it, you know, take a shit, whatever.
Well, Skinny, thanks for having me on, and really, I can't thank you enough for your support of Cuck and all the really great things you've said about the movie, and I hope your listeners kind of dive into this. And we are just, I'll give a little shout out to our releases coming up. We're doing like I said, we're doing a theatrical release in London on April 17th. If the coronavirus maybe takes a break, it's looking less and less like it is every day. But then we are going streaming SVOD. Actually, we're going VOD on April 20th in the UK and Australia, so you can see it on iTunes, Amazon, all that stuff in abroad. So thanks for giving me the chance to talk about the movies some more, and yeah, let's stay in touch.
Okay, then you definitely got it there. I hope more people go see Cuck. It's a great film. It is an 18 certificate for strong sex, discriminatory language and behavior. So keep the kids at home. Just put them on Frozen in this instance. But if you're open-minded, I want a movie that kind of rings like a mix between Fallen Down, American History X, and Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Definitely give Cuck a try.
Nice.
This is Skinny Ebert. This is Skinny Ebert signing off. Until next time, keep on watching, and thank you so much, Mr. Lambert, for stopping on by.
You too. Thanks, Skinny.